Hello, welcome to UPSC Aspirants Zone. Today we will be talking about the bittersweet relation between India and US, the world's oldest democracy and the world's largest democracy. So, before we start, we need to know something about USA. So, USA or the United States of America is a federal republic of 50 states. It is bounded on the north by Canada, on the east by Atlantic Ocean, and on the south by Gulf of Mexico, which recently President Trump was talking about naming it Gulf of America. Okay. Moreover, the United States is the fourth largest country in the world in area after Russia, Canada, and China. Its military capabilities, economic size, science and technology base, and active involvement in international affairs provide it a unique status. So let's move forward. After the independence of India in 1947, the relationship with US was not so cordial, mostly because the relationship of America and Pakistan was problematic for India. In history, there are certain reasons and events that took place shows that why India and US relationship back in the days was not so good. Because in the 2 decades of independence, India depended on the supply of wheat under the PL 480 program of the US, which was suspended in the mid 1960s over political differences. Washington also provided India some economic assistance, particularly as latter's ties with China deteriorated. Moreover, India refused to join either American or the Soviet side in the Cold War conflict and instead charted its own non aligned course, largely independent of either superpower. This There were certain steps from the American side to build trust with India, but India didn't reciprocate in the same way. As we can see in the 1962 Sino Indian War, US publicly supported India's interpretation of its border with China in the eastern Himalayas. However, despite its potential and occasional periods of Indo US cooperation, it was clear from early that India would not serve as an active US ally in battle against global communism. From the US perspective, the main problem with Indian policy was that of non alignment, which the US took for neutrality at a time when it was locked in a battle of ideas. Likewise, in the late 1960s, as Sino Soviet rift deepened, the US gravitated towards China and the USSR towards India. This was perceived to be beginning of India's tilt towards USSR, a process that gained momentum in the early 1970s. At the strategic level, the Soviet Union afforded India crucial protection against regional adversaries. In 1971, New Delhi and Moscow signed a treaty of peace, friendship, and cooperation under which the two parties promised to aid one another in the event of a perceived military threat. India's non aligned foreign policy thus became a source of considerable irritation to the US. Not only did Indians refused to assist the US in containing Soviet power, but they also actively cooperated with the Soviet Union in significant ways. Beyond these strategic problems, India was economically unattractive during the Cold War. In essence, during the Cold War, India refused to promote US grand strategic goals and offered few economic benefits while posing a little direct military threat to American interests. India therefore was largely ignored. The disintegration of Soviet Union and the end of Cold War had profound consequences for India's foreign and security policies. The collapse of the Soviet Union required Indian policymakers to recalculate their strategic options. No longer could they rely on their superpower allies' military and diplomatic protection, nor the Russians made clear would the Indians be able to continue purchasing arms under exceptionally favorable Cold War terms. New Delhi realized that a closer relationship with Washington could help them fill the vacuum left by Soviet Union's fall and also balance rising power of Beijing. So let's now move forward to the current status of Indo-US alliance. Currently, we see a betterment in the US-Indo relationship. as advancing economic opportunities that India has, as USA is the topmost merchandise export destination for India. India also has joined three pillars of USA-led Indo-Pacific Economic Framework. Moreover, strengthening of global strategic influence, that is Quad, a diplomatic partnership between Australia, India, Japan, and the United States, committed to supporting an open, stable, and prosperous Indo-Pacific. Such initiatives will help countering the influence of China. And in defense modernization and capacity development, India has signed foundational defense agreement with the US, which include a general security of military information agreement, logistics exchange memorandum of agreement, which is LEMOA, communications capability and security agreement, which is COMCASA, and basic exchange and cooperation agreement, which is BECA. US recognized India as a major defense partner with strategic trade authorization 1, which is STA1 authorization. Expanding frontiers in emerging technologies, like the launched US India Initiative on Critical and Emerging Technologies ICET of 2023, expanding space outreach through NISAR, the NASA ISRO Synthetic Aperture Radar mission. Also, India has joined the US-led Artemis Accord, which provides for a common set of principles to enhance the governance of the civil exploration and use of outer space. Now, ensuring energy security. US designed nuclear reactors will be built in India to fully realize the US India 123 Civil Nuclear Agreement of 2008. In recent years, the US has emerged as one of the largest suppliers of liquefied natural gas to India. And in the field of counterterrorism, as US recently approved the extradition to India of Tahavur Rana, who was accused in the 26/11 attacks. Moreover, in the support at multilateral forums, US support for India's Permanent Security Council membership and Nuclear Suppliers Group. US also supports India's bid to join the International Energy Agency as a full member. India and US also share nice cordial relationship in fighting the climate change and in the field of renewable energy. As US joined the India-led International Solar Alliance, also launched US India Renewable Energy Technology Action Platform RETAP. Both India and US are part of Global Biofuel Alliance. One of the most landmark deal between India and US was the civil nuclear deal. In 2005, India and US announced their intention to conclude a bilateral civil nuclear agreement. The bilateral civil nuclear cooperation agreement was finalized in July 2007, which was signed in October 2008 after the US Congress passed the 123 agreement bill in September that year. And the NSG, which is the Nuclear Suppliers Group, agreed to exempt India from its rule of requiring full scope safeguards for nuclear trade and non-weapon states. Process also involved negotiating India-specific safeguards with IAEA. The agreement provided for separation of India's military and civilian facilities. It also allowed India to reserve all its indigenous uranium for its weapon program. Moreover, it gave India the sole authority for determining the future of which facilities will be safeguarded. The US law and Nuclear Suppliers Group guidelines forbid the sharing of nuclear fuel and technology with countries classified as non-nuclear weapon states under the NPT unless those states accept full scope of International Atomic Energy Agency safeguards. The Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty is a key in international cooperation in arena of civilian nuclear programs. Thus, this civil nuclear agreement provided India a re-entry into international nuclear cooperation with exceptional arrangement with USA, NSG, and the IAEA. The civil nuclear agreement also has played an important role in facilitating recent US-India rapprochement, helped India make progress in developing clean energy options, ending isolation at technology regimes such as the MTCR and the Wassenaar arrangement. made nuclear commerce possible with other countries. The agreement stuck on resolving certain issues related to some of the provisions of Indian Civil Liability for Nuclear Damage Act. Another issue was a successful negotiation of the administrative arrangements for the implementation of the India-US 123 nuclear agreement. The issues in respect of CLNDA related to the conformity of the CLNDA with the provisions of the Convention on Supplementary Compensation signed in 2010 but ratified in 2016 by India. Section 17B of CLNDA, which allowed for right of recourse against the supplier, and Section 46, which allowed the legal case against the operator under acts other than the CLNDA. Now, the administrative arrangements under discussions were with respect to the accounting and tracking of US supplied nuclear materials and materials produced with the use of US supplied. During Prime Minister Modi's visit to the US in September 2024, the two sides set up a contact group for advancing the full and timely implementation of the India US Civil Nuclear Cooperation Agreement and to resolve pending issues. During President Obama's visit to India in 2015, it was announced that India and the United States had come to an understanding on two major issues that stood in the way of successful full implementation of the Indo-US nuclear deal. The two sides started the preparatory work on the site in India for six AP-1000 reactors to be built by Westinghouse. Once completed, the project would be among the largest of its kind. Moreover, the Nuclear Power Corporation of India Limited and Westinghouse are in talks toward finalizing contractual arrangements and addressing related issues. The Westinghouse, however, on March 29, 2017, filed for a Chapter 11 bankruptcy in New York. This perhaps is a bottleneck in progress of its projects in India that both countries would have to overcome. The deal is being reworked now. So it's a work in progress, and there have been certain progress in the field, and so let's hope for the best now. And now if we focus on the India US cooperation on nuclear energy with a little bit of historic background, we would find that more than 1,000 of Indian scientists between 1955 and 1974 participated in the US nuclear energy research projects. The sale of US heavy water to India in the 1960s that was used in the unsafeguarded CIRUS reactor that produced plutonium for India's first nuclear explosion. US assistance in the building and fueling of the Tarapur reactors, and the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Act of 1917, now usually referred to as the NNPA, was signed by President Jimmy Carter in 1978. This put a legal break to nuclear cooperation with India. So it has been a roller coaster ride between the two countries about the nuclear aspects. But now the times have changed. India is also the fourth largest economy in the world, though by per capita GDP we lag behind the world a lot. But still, India has a big value in the global affairs. So now the things are not like history, it needs a little more push so that India could shift to more cleaner energy production. So now moving forward, let's now focus on the tactful cooperation that lies between the two countries. Okay. So there are more than 50 bilateral dialogue mechanisms between the two governments. The strategic and commercial dialogue at the level of EAM, that is the External Affairs Minister, and the MOS were held in Washington DC in September 2015 and New Delhi in August 2016. The apex level dialogue has added a commercial component to the five traditional pillars of bilateral relation on which the erstwhile strategic dialogue of foreign ministers had focused, namely strategic cooperation, energy and climate, education and development, economy, trade and agriculture, science and technology, and health and innovation. A policy planning dialogue has also been started between the two sides in September 2015. In addition, there are ministerial level dialogues involving home the Homeland Security Dialogue, Finance, the Financial and Economic Partnership, Commerce, Trade Policy Forum, HRD, Higher Education Dialogue, Science and Technology Joint Commission meeting on S&T, that is Science and Technology, and on Energy, Energy Dialogue. There have been regular contacts at political and official level on bilateral, regional, and global issues. The frequency of high level visits and exchanges between India and the US have gone up significantly in the recent years. Prime Minister Modi's visit to US from 2014 till 2024 have increased a lot. Events like Namaste Trump and Howdy Modi are living proof that the relationship between India and US have gone to a significant height. Otherwise, we don't remember when was the last time that an Indian Prime Minister visited directly for the election campaign of a US president, and when was the last time that a US president came for an indirect election campaign of the current Prime Minister of India. So it shows deepening of relationship between the two countries. And in 2016, Prime Minister visited the US for multilateral nuclear security summit hosted by President Obama in Washington DC. The PM addressed the joint session of the US Congress. He was the sixth Indian Prime Minister to address the US Congress. Also, a hotline was established in 2015 between the Prime Minister's office and the White House. It was only new hotline that was established during the 8 years of Obama administration. India is only the fourth country after Russia, Britain, and China with which US has a hotline. Now moving to the defense cooperation between India and US. Defense relationship has emerged as a major pillar of India-US strategic partnership. With the signing of new framework for India-US defense relations in 2005, the Defense Framework Agreement was updated and renewed for another 10 years in June 2015. This has resulted in intensification in defense trade, joint exercises, personal exchanges, collaboration and cooperation in maritime security and counter piracy, and exchanges between each of the three services. Joint Strategic Vision Statement for the Asia Pacific and the Indian Ocean region 2015, which called for safeguarding maritime security and ensuring freedom of navigation and overflight throughout the Asia Pacific region. In context of the RIM APC, the two countries now conduct more bilateral exercises with each other than they do with any other country. India participated in Rim of the Pacific exercises in July 2016 for the second time with an Indian naval frigate. In context of Malabar exercise, India, US, Japan trilateral naval exercises, the annual Malabar exercise started in 1992 as a bilateral event between the navies of India and the United States. In 2015, Japan became a permanent participant in the Malabar exercises. There is also expanding scope of defense cooperation, like the agreements signed during the past 2 years include Logistics Exchange Memorandum of Association (LEMOA) signed in August 2016, Fuel Exchange Agreement signed in November 2015, Technical Agreement on Information Sharing on White Shipping signed in May 2016, and Information Exchange Annex on Aircraft Carrier Technologies signed in 2016. Aggregate worth of defense acquisition from US has crossed over $13 billion according to the 2016 data. Now, if we look at the Defense Technology Trade Initiative, India and the US launched a Defense Technology Trade Initiative in 2012, which aimed at simplifying technology transfer policies and exploring possibilities of co-development and co-production to invest the defense relationship with strategic value. The DTTI working group and its task force will expeditiously evaluate and decide on unique projects and technologies which would have a transformative impact on bilateral defense relations and enhance India's defense industry and military capabilities. During President Obama's visit in January 2015, the two sides agreed to start a cooperation on four DTTI Pathfinder projects and two Pathfinder initiatives which are currently at various stages of execution. During the visit of Prime Minister to the US in June 2016, the US recognized India as the major defense partner, which commits the US to facilitate technology sharing with India to a level commensurate with that of its closest allies and partners, and industry collaboration for defense co-production and co-development. In December 2016, US Congress passed an amendment, Section 1292, titled Enhancing Defense and Security Cooperation with India, to the National Defense Authorization Act of 2017, which is the NDAA, an annual bill that allocates funding to the US military. Section 1258 of the NDAA 2018 moves the bill forward by institutionalizing the relationship. The bill title Advancement in Defense Cooperation between the United States and India directs the Department of State, Defense and Commerce to jointly produce common definition that recognizes India's status as a major defense partner for joint use by the three departments. Moving on to counter-terrorism and internal security. Cooperation in counter-terrorism has seen considerable progress with intelligence sharing, information exchange, operational cooperation, counter-terrorism technology and equipment. India-US Counter-Terrorism Cooperation Initiative was signed in 2010 to expand collaboration on counter-terrorism, information sharing and capacity building. A Homeland Security Dialogue was announced during President Obama's visit to India in November 2010 to further deepen operational cooperation, counter-terrorism technology transfers, and capacity building. Moving forward, as evident from the recent Pahalgam attack and the 26/11 attacks and the Pulwama attack and the Uri base attack, it's evident that India and Pakistan have a troubled past, present, and future relations. So, if we see in context of the India-US relation, traditionally any strategic interest that US had in South Asia was primarily with India's arch rival Pakistan. This was evident as Pakistan notionally supported American grand strategic goals, including participating in anti communist military alliances such as the Central Treaty Organization and Southeast Asia Treaty Organization. Pakistan also has allowed Washington to use its territory as a base for overflights to eavesdrop on the Soviet Union, in addition to serving as a vital conduit for American arms shipment to anti-Soviet forces in Afghanistan during the 1980s. In return, Pakistan received substantial American economic and military assistance. America's support for Pakistan was apparent during the 1971 Bangladesh War, when President Nixon tilted towards Pakistan and dispatched aircraft carrier USS Enterprise to the Bay of Bengal. India viewed this move as an attempt to deter it from taking further action against Pakistan. The close relationship between US and Pakistan thus had an exceedingly negative impact on the Indo-US relation. Moreover, US has provided multi-billion dollar military aid to Pakistan. But time and things have changed, as we can see in the recent trends, like during the Indian PM's visit to the US in June 2017, the biggest takeaway in substantive terms was the stern language against Pakistan and the designation of Syed Salahuddin, the supreme commander of Kashmiri militant outfit Hizbul Mujahideen, as a specially designated global terrorist because of his pronouncement about wreaking havoc in Kashmir and making it a graveyard for Indian forces. In 2017, while unveiling his new South Asia strategy, Mr. Trump had accused Pakistan of giving safe haven to agents of chaos, violence, and terror, and said the time had come for Pakistan to demonstrate its commitment to civilization, order, and to peace. Surprisingly, in the first week of January 2018, the US suspended about $2 billion in security aid to Pakistan for failing to clamp down on terror groups. This includes foreign military funding, FMF, and the Coalition Support Fund, CSF. Moreover, some policymakers of the US have been asking the White House to revoke the non NATO ally status of Pakistan and put pressure on the country through multilateral institutions like the International Monetary Fund and the United Nations. Pentagon generals have indicated unilateral actions. As the grip of the US tightened on Pakistan, it immediately tilted toward China, and China now appears set for an even higher and tighter embrace of its already iron brother Pakistan. In the first week of 2018, Pakistan's central bank swiftly announced that it would use the Chinese yuan to settle bilateral trade and investment with China. The Global Times, a Chinese newspaper, signaled that Pakistan would be justified in defining a new geopolitical calculus that covers China and Russia. A distinctive pattern of triangular interaction has emerged in relationship among China, India, and the United States during the post-Cold War period. China was one significant factor in the emergence of new Indo-US relationship. Each actor apprehends alignment of the other two against itself. The fear exists for all the three actors, but is especially strong for the two weaker state actors, the China and India. China is an emerging challenger to the global influence of the United States. It is also a key neighbor of India. Thus, the triangle acquires a new salience in the changing geopolitics. All the three states are members of G20. India and China also cooperate in BRICS and AIIB but diverge on OBOR. But India and USA converge on the OBOR. President Barack Obama's pivot to Asia, announced in 2011, involved an attempt to rebalance US foreign policy away from the Middle East and towards East Asia. The Obama administration spent 8 years formulating the foreign policy vision known as the rebalance to Asia. The policy involved coordinated efforts to boost US defense, diplomatic, and economic ties with Asia Pacific. American strategic partnerships have generally expanded in the Asian region as they did from 2001 to 2008. There is more continuity and bipartisan consensus around the Asia policy in the United States. In 2009, President Obama emphasized his intention to respect China's core interest in Asia, to the alarm of American allies. Then in 2011, after China began throwing its weight around and twisting arms, the US administration announced its rebalance to Asia with a new military deployment to Australia, to the alarm of China. Then in 2013, the Obama administration shook American allies again by walking away from the red line on Syria and announcing support to Xi Jinping's new model of great power relations, a proposed condominium of the United States and China in Asia that looked very much like the earlier pledge to respect China's core interest. With President Trump, there are both elements of continuity and change. His visit to the China in November 2017 and his praise of China in light of previous criticism of Beijing. Now let's move to the country with which India shares a special history and relation, which is one of the major irritants of the India-US relationship, the Russia factor. Russia is the largest military competitor of USA in the world. It has been getting closer to China. Moreover, Russia has been the largest military supplier to India. But like every other relationship, there is a problem between India and Russia as now Moscow seems to be pivoting towards Islamabad as new India becomes closer to Washington. In 2015, Russia had lifted its embargo on arms supply to Pakistan and negotiated supply of combat helicopters. Russia signed gas pipelines pact with Pakistan in 2015, an estimated investment of 2 billion US dollars. Russia and China are collaborating closely, and in 2014 both signed a 30-year gas deal estimated to be over 400 billion US dollars. The US NSS identifies both Russia and China as national security challenges. President Trump remains ambivalent about Russia and President Putin. But during the Russia Ukraine war, we saw how India refrained from voting against Russia, which again highlighted its special relationship with the previously with USSR and now with Russia. Though there are international sanctions on Russia, but still India buys crude oil and other petroleum products from Russia at a cheaper rate, which shows India's independence in global matters and how India will focus on its own national interest. So we have come a long way with our relationship with the United States. It's good for both of the countries to benefit, but it would be negative only if USA gets benefited from the relationship. As we saw during the tariff war in the recent times, how US firstly imposed a lot of tariffs on the Indian products, which caused a havoc in the Indian market, but after a few days he reverted back to the old policy. So we need to keep in mind that though we need to keep a healthy and cordial relationship with the superpowers and other countries, but we need to keep the Indian interest first. We need to keep our people at the forefront, their benefits at the forefront, their welfare at the forefront. Then only we can realize the dreams of our forefathers and foremothers. With China and Bangladesh and Pakistan, we cannot afford negative relation with US because we need military help, we need military aid, we need the American support in dealing with the hostile neighbors, but at the same time we need our own development so that we can realize our full potential and capabilities and have a more strong foot in the global affairs, global matters, where what India says is respected and given value to, and it steers the direction of other countries' policy. So thank you for watching the video. I hope you got to know a lot about the Indo-US relationship, and this was part one of the Indo-US relationship. I will cover the other aspects in the next part of the long video. So until then, thank you. Take care. Jai Hind.